Hi, everybody. Welcome once again to Renew Missouri. We are doing our semi-regular, almost monthly webinars on energy policy and just general things that you should know. Today, we are going to be spending the next 50 minutes on the topic of navigating the impact of FERC Order 2222 on Missouri's energy landscape. That has been put together by us, but I'd also like to thank our sponsors at Blitz, Barget, and Deutsch. That's a law firm that serves mid-Missouri, serves the St. Louis area, and we do appreciate them and their support of this effort. Next slide, please. So just to kind of go over the basics, Renew Missouri, who are we? We were founded in 2006 to advance renewable energy and energy efficiency advocacy, to advance energy efficiency and renewable energy across the state. We have worked on legislation. We have passed a statewide ballot initiative. We've worked on local ordinances. And we have represented these interests before Public Service Commission in Missouri, Kansas Corporation Commission in Kansas, and the Public Service Commission in Kentucky, among other places. We work with county and city offices all over the state on these issues. And we are trying to work directly with the public in order not just to educate them, but also to make them leaders on this subject as well, because we do believe it is important for people to understand what these issues are and why it matters in their daily life. So that is a little bit about what we do. Most of our work is advocacy before regulators. We do a little bit of lobbying, that direct communication with the public. Next slide, please. Oh, there I am. Who am I? Why, I'm James Owen. I'm the executive director of Renew Missouri. Let's see. Yeah, I've got my whole bio here. I am an attorney by trade and by training and education and background. I was in private practice for a number of years. As a law clerk. I am a former judge. I was a judge in Webster County, Missouri, as an associate circuit judge there. That was about 10 years ago. Relevant to my job, relevant to this job, I had been public counsel before this. I had been the ratepayer advocate for the state of Missouri before the Public Service Commission for a little bit. And I have served, we got to update this, Tori. It says I've served as executive director of Renew Missouri for 4 years. I have been here for close to 7. It will have been 7 years in May that I have been the executive director of this organization. Yeah, this is a little out of date. So is that picture, so don't worry about that. I am from Missouri, proudly. I was born and raised on a dairy farm in Webster County, Missouri. I should also note that is where I practice law, and that is where I was an associate circuit judge. So I do have humble roots. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to jump into this kind of at the high level. We're kind of going to do like this high summary of this, and then we're going to kind of like go backwards a little bit and try to explain some of this. So FERC Order 2222, that was issued by FERC in September of 2020. It opens the U.S. wholesale markets to new sources of energy and grid services. It enables distributive energy resources, or DERs, as we will call them in this in this presentation, to participate alongside traditional sources in regional wholesale markets through aggregator entities. We're going to talk about that too. The key elements to understanding this order includes aggregation, DER aggregation, the kind of third parties that are going to be dealing with the distributive energy resources and bundling those up for regular customers, market access of distributive energy resources, market rules and tariffs, operation considerations, the types of distributive energy resources, as well as the compliance and reporting that goes along with with this new rule and this order. So, okay, so that's what FERC is. FERC Order 2222 is at the big level. So before anyone asks any questions, let's talk about some of these basic elements. Okay, next slide, please. Well, let's just start with what FERC is. It's the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. It is the agency within the Department of Energy at the federal level responsible for regulating the interstate transmission of electricity, natural gas, and oil. So, transmission lines, transmission organizations, gas pipelines, etc. That is what FERC regulates, and that has been delegated to them by Congress. And that is what their responsibilities are. It also oversees energy markets, ensuring reliability and approving infrastructure projects such as pipelines and hydropower facilities. Kind of just said that. So that's some of the other things they do, the hydropower facilities like dams and whatnot. FERC does play a crucial role in shaping the energy policy, promoting competition and safeguarding the interests of consumers. Yeah, I mean, I think, everyone on this call, if you are involved with, energy policy at any level, you are keenly aware of the importance of transmission. Right now, you're keenly aware of like what it means to have a robust transmission infrastructure here in this country. And there is a lot of effort to try to bolster that up and make that even more pronounced. It's really important for us who are doing clean energy advocacy for transmission to be as strong as possible, because that is how we get clean energy such as wind and solar to customers that live in more dense urban areas. So yeah, that's kind of an example of some of the things that FERC does. There's 5 commissioners on FERC. They're appointed by the president, and I do believe they do have to be confirmed by Congress. I think that's right. I'm kind of doing that off the fly. There's always a lot of kind of intrigue and kind of palace drama, because every once in a while these positions are left open, or they're got temporary appointments that are kind of in between administrations, and so sometimes that can have a critical impact on what decisions are being made about all of these policies. Next slide, please. Okay, wholesale sales of electricity. What are we talking about when we talk about retail sales and wholesale sales? So retail sales is the utility sale of electricity to the customer, whether you are a residential customer or a commercial and industrial customer. That is generally, and we'll kind of talk about this from a Missouri perspective. In Missouri, that is only going to be coming from your utility company. That's going to be, depending on which part of the state you're in, that's going to be, one of the investor-owned utilities like Evergy or Ameren or Liberty Empire, or in the rural areas, it might be one of the rural electric cooperatives. Or if you're in a city like Springfield or Columbia, that's going to be a municipal utility. So that's where your retail sales are going to come from. Wholesale sales, which sounds funny because it's basically sounds like we're repeating ourselves. That's the bulk sale of electricity. That's up the chain one step from the end user customer, which would be where the retail sale happens. That market involves the buying and selling of bulk power to and from various entities, including retail utilities, like those utilities I just mentioned, regional transmission organizations, RTOs, as well as the distributive energy resources. I'm not sure that's exactly quite how I describe that, but the independent generation that happens with wind, solar, battery storage, gas, even coal. You have like those independent producers that are a part of the grid that are interconnected to these regional transmission organizations, which we'll get into what those are here in a minute as well. So that's where wholesale sales comes from. I mean, basically, you're talking about, at least in a regulated state, when you're talking about a state like Missouri, where we have a vertically integrated state, The bulk sale of power is going to be done at the regional level, and it's going to involve the utilities. It's going to involve independent producers, etc. Um, and that would be our second point, that utility companies do retail sales, and as they participate in wholesale markets, that's they are able to do both, and that participation in wholesale markets is considered interstate commerce and thus under FERC jurisdiction, which is precisely why we are talking about this at the federal level. We're going to get into how that interacts with regional and state policies as well, but that's later on in the presentation. Okay, so what FERC Order 2222 does is enables aggregators of distributed energy resources to sell wholesale power into organized electricity markets run by RTOs. The distributed energy resource owner operators are in the position of simultaneously being retail customers while also participating in wholesale markets. So that's going to be the big thing that this is going to do. So if you are a customer of a monopolistic utility, like what we have here in the state, where everything is vertically integrated, you will be able to, once this order is put fully into place, be able to also participate in the wholesale market through this aggregation. And that's the easy description of what we're talking about here. Next slide, please. Okay, I just noticed one of my other fellow Kansas practitioners joined here. I think I'll repeat what I said at the beginning, was that we do have Missouri credit. We have an hour of continuing legal education for this, and we are still waiting for Kansas credit too. So once that happens, and you are a Kansas lawyer, I will let you know. Okay, got that out of the way. Okay, so we've been talking about MISO and SPP and RTOs. What is an independent system operator, ISO, versus what is a regional transmission operator, RTO? So an ISO, like MISO, they basically kind of operate in a similar way, as far at least in what we're talking about for this subject. They coordinate, control, and monitor the electric grid to ensure reliability, safety, and economic efficiency. It is a nonprofit corporation that has authority to operate the transmission lines owned by utilities in the region. They do not own the transmission infrastructure. So let's talk a little bit about this, because this is also important for Missouri, because you'll notice if you look at this map, what you see here is you see three different colors in this map. Now, I think that's a little deceptive, and I'm going to tell you why. Because you see the light blue, that's MISO. That is the organization that, among other entities, Ameren, Missouri, and the city of Columbia belong to. Utilities join these organizations, and they basically pay in a lot of money. And basically they are able to, and they also not only have to pay membership, which is a lot of money, but then whenever there is a need for a transmission line or transmission project, they also have to chip into that as well. But MISO or SPP would be the ones that are building that. And so essentially then it just kind of acts like, it's almost like a reverse auction, where, if you've got these transmission lines that are being managed by MISO, you're a MISO member. Like, let's say that you are in a situation as a utility company where you are running short of what power you need, and there's someone else in MISO that is making more power than they need. Then there is a process of where you buying that directly from those from that grid and being able to use that for your customers. That's the same case for SPP and MISO. You also notice the third color here, and this map labels it as the Southeast, but that is short for the Southeast Energy Marketplace, or SEAM. And SEAM is not an ISO, and it is not a regional transmission organization. I mean, it's basically just a entity that was created because there aren't any ISOs or RTOs in the Southeast, which surprises some people. But it is really not even like an open marketplace. It's just basically a trading system among the utilities that are there. They just basically are able to kind of work with each other. There's not very much transparency. The state governments are not involved with this. And I should also point out that SEAM was the application for SEAM to be created. And I should note that the Missouri Rural Electric Cooperatives are a member of SEAM. The application to create SEAM had been tossed out by the DC federal court, and that is presently back in front of FERC right now for approval. So it's in a bit of a limbo. So I'm not trying to say this is an inaccurate map. I'm trying to say that that is, a little more complicated than it looks. And I would say I would be hard pressed to define it as an ISO or as an RTO. So that's important. And I would also note I do not believe that FERC 2222 would necessarily apply to SEAM either. So if you're talking about rural electric cooperatives here in Missouri, I don't think that is necessarily going to be something that applies to them. Okay. Having said all of that, I'm going to get to that last bullet point. Due to FERC Order 2222, distributed energy resource aggregators have the opportunity to earn the same compensation as other types of resources that participate in the RTO markets, like utility-owned power plants. It can also include the independent power generators like large-scale solar, large-scale wind, large-scale gas. It's also part of that grid. So basically, you're talking about the customers and their distributed energy resources being able to take advantage of that, financial compensation. So that's kind of what this order is trying to do in terms of how it interacts with ISO and the ISOs and the RTOs. Next slide, please. Okay, so how does FERC Order 2222 impact customers and the grid? As I was just saying, let's give the example of a typical residential house that might kind of be above the curb as far as technological innovations on it. And I mean, this is important, especially because, and I think I think I saw somebody from Evergy on there. So I'm going to use Evergy as an example here. Evergy just got approval. I shouldn't say just got approval. They received approval in their last rate case to test out a residential battery storage pilot where they're going to have residential battery kind of packets put into people's houses, kind of with an emphasis on houses that have rooftop solar on them, and to see how that might interact and how that might work at a large scale. The utility would own the batteries with a chance for the homeowner to buy it later on. Like let's say you are in the Evergy service territory, you have solar on your roof, you have a battery storage system in your house. You would, in theory, under this, be able to produce that, and that would be able to go to the market directly as a result of Order 2222. That could, because like right now, with rooftop solar, with battery storage, you have the ability, and just to kind of get into this, the net metering law, you put rooftop solar on your roof, you have battery storage, you are able then to, that power that's produced from your solar array goes onto the grid. The utility has to take that power. They can sell it, or they can use it. They can sell it to other customers. They can use it for however they want. And you get a credit for that. You get a credit for for that's being produced. And so that's how net metering works. And the idea would be that this could increase your compensation, and it would be able to, allow you to have more financial incentive to put rooftop solar or battery storage either at your house or at your business. So that's kind of an example of that. And that's why I think this might be preferable to, like, let's say Missouri's Net Metering and Easy Connection Act, that is on the law that helps, that requires utility companies to interconnect with your system on your rooftop. So basically, when we talk about distributed energy resources, which sounds like a complicated phrase, but it is really, we're talking about rooftop solar. We're talking about battery storage. We're also talking about things ultimately like your electric vehicles, if you have charging that's going to be bi-directional, and that would be able to store that as well. So those are just some of the things that we're talking about. What are the benefits to the grid? I mean, certainly it sounds like it's a benefit to the customer who might be making more money. But what I think FERC is interested in is reducing stress on the grid. I think what they're interested in is being able to give people incentives and compensation for producing their own power, for storing their own power, for investing in this innovation, and being able to have that on the grid, not only for the utility or for the market to be able to use the power, but also so you're not just draining power off the grid, you're not just using it, you're contributing to the grid as well. And I think that's the idea of this, is that they would be able to be able to incentivize that. And that ultimately would be, while it's not going to produce a lot of power, house by house, business by business, and we'll get into how that's addressed. But it is ultimately going to add up to something more significant. Next slide, please. Oh, so here, so here is like here's kind of more like kind of fleshing out what I was just talking about. What is a distributive energy resource? It's any resource located on the distribution system or subsystem, including any resources behind a customer meter. Now, not a lot of people have these resources behind their customer meter. That's like, we talk about going off the grid. That's what we're talking about here. But as I mentioned, um, battery storage, solar arrays, electric vehicles, those things can be distributed energy resources. One thing I didn't mention, which I think is also really important to having any conversation about Missouri, is demand response. Now, we don't usually use that phrase. We don't necessarily talk about demand response unless we're talking about large scale development. But, I can certainly tell you that the more sophisticated technology that utilities are able to deploy, as far as like advanced meters, as far as like how they're being able to collect data, I think you're going to start seeing energy efficiency and the ability to control the demand of the power that you're using. I think you're going to start seeing that become more sophisticated. I think you're going to start seeing that become more of kind of become more of a systematic process, as opposed to just like, oh, we're going to like give you rebates and we're going to give you incentives to invest in energy efficient appliances and programs at your house. I think that the real promise of large scale energy efficiency programs, like let's say pay as you save, which is something that we are seeing develop in the larger investor-owned utilities in the state. Being able to make that as a capital investment into a customer's home or a customer's small business, that's really important. And I think you're going to start seeing that be a larger conversation about this distributed energy resource. They're growing at an exponential rate. I think you can look at the numbers that show that solar technicians and solar installers are the fastest growing job in the state of Missouri. And you can tell that is something that people are really starting to invest into. That's going to be more pronounced. I think the more that you see people take advantage of these tax credits that are being offered under the Inflation Reduction Act, where you can get at a minimum 30% tax credit for putting these on your house. Or if you're a nonprofit or you're, a non-taxable entity, you would be able to get a direct payment of cash from the federal government for that. So I think you're going to start seeing more and more of that. I think you're also going to see more and more battery storage. Battery storage, I've been hearing for like the 8 years I've been doing energy policy work. You keep hearing batteries are just turning the corner as far as like what they're going to be able to accomplish. I believe that when you start seeing pilots like what Evergy was granted in their last rate case, where you're going to start seeing battery storage get put into people's houses, you're starting to see large scale battery deployment happening in states like Illinois, New York, California. You're going to start seeing that same type of investment being done here as well. And so you're going to see that at the large scale, you're going to see that at the small scale. So I think you're going to start seeing more and more of that on people's homes. Next slide, please. Okay, I've been talking about a lot about these aggregators. And I think this is, this is why this is important to kind of talk about like how we scale distributed energy resources. Because if you have a solar array on your roof, you have a battery storage in your basement. I mean, in the end, that is not a whole lot of power compared to what a utility company is generating and transmitting and distributing. So what happens here is an aggregator of retail customers, ARCs, that act as market participants that represent the distributed energy resource characteristics of many customers. What these ARCs can do, what these aggregators can do, well, you can sign up with them. You can bundle your distributed energy resources with them as a single entity, and then they will put that onto the marketplace for you. So they'll take their cut, they'll take their money from you. But ultimately, if they have enough people signed up that have solar, that have batteries, that have demand response, that have electric vehicle charging at their home, in their garage, you will be able to work with this aggregator, and they will be able to then sell that on the wholesale market. So it's just not so much a matter of you working with MISO as a homeowner, because that would be rather cumbersome. But to have this kind of middle party involved with this that would be doing that. Now that kind of raises the question about like, what we would view this as. And I mean, we talk about virtual power plant here. I mean, I believe that's something that utility companies can do. Believe that is a direction that we may be going in. I know that there are Missouri utilities that have invested a lot into the research and development of virtual power plants, where you have battery storage and solar and electric vehicle batteries at your home, and you're able to have that stored, and the utility could call it up. I mean, that's a virtual power plant. But you could also make the argument that could work at the wholesale level as well. That could work if MISO or SPP needed that power. They could call it up too, and they would be using this aggregator of retail customers, this ARC, to do that. And that's a really important thing to know, that individual customers, individual residences, individual businesses could end up being a source of generation as long as there's enough of them doing it. Next slide, please. So I kind of just explained all of that just then. So basically you've got your one house here with the battery storage and the solar, and then it kind of gets bundled up into other customers, and it goes right to the RTO market. And then the RTO market pays the aggregator, they pay the individual customer. And I mean, so there's going to be, money, there's going to be money exchanged there, there's going to be money extracted there. But that's the idea. This is kind of like what we're talking about here. And I know this is a little bit of a confusing graphic, because it looks like the aggregator is just a bunch of these, but that is what it is. It is actually trying to bundle those up, and that's what's selling it directly to the RTO market. That's why that aggregator is so important to FERC Order 2222. Next slide, please. Okay, so, but I mean, if this all sounds complicated, it is a little bit. And if it sounds like something that maybe if you're a utility company that is in a vertically integrated market, that you might not love the idea that your customers are going to be able to go, going to be able to go and sell directly to the RTO market. Uh, and so, because you might see that could be some problems or challenges to that, or maybe some coordination issues, or maybe that it's a belief that the utility has invested a lot of money into the infrastructure, into the grid, and that this is just kind of using that to help somebody else make money. Okay, so understanding all of that, um, each RTO or ISO that is regulated by FERC has to adopt market rules to address that coordination between the RTO and the ISO, between these DER providers, between the utilities, as well as state regulators, regulatory authorities. Because FERC has jurisdiction over wholesale markets, they don't necessarily have jurisdiction over retail customers. That, in most, if not all cases, is regulated by the state. That's regulated by the Public Service Commission or the Kansas Corporation Commission in Kansas. And so there's got to have to be some coordination there as well. I mean, one of the things that I think is good about the RTOs and ISOs are their boards, their governance does include state regulators, does factor in the states that are participating in those different marketplaces, and does include them as part of the work they do as part of like what they oversee. And I think that is really important. And I think that's why it's superior to, let's say, the Southeast energy market, as an example. And that's another reason why the Missouri Public Service Commission or the Kansas Corporation Commission are going to have to look at how their rules and how their regulations work within this as well. Okay, so the RTO and ISOs must incorporate a process for the distribution of utilities, review of distributed energy resources to determine whether a particular distributed energy resource can participate in aggregation, and if the distributed energy resource participation will create a reliability or safety issue. This is something that you hear come up in the in terms of net metering. You will hear some utilities talk about how the grid and how the distribution system was only designed for power to be delivered into a home. It is not designed to take power from a home. And that's why there are those kind of challenges. But I mean, the reality is that there are state regulations on how that interconnection works. There are state regulations about what kind of equipment is supposed to be used and how that's supposed to be designed. And so basically, we're now talking about that at a larger scale with this new market that we're developing. And all of these RTOs and ISOs must establish protocols to override the dispatch of DER aggregation between RTOs, ISOs, DER providers, and the distribution utility. So basically, what we're talking about there is we want a situation where if the customer using an aggregator is, delivering power to the market, is delivering power to this wholesale market, and the utility is doing that as well. They want to make sure that's being done in conjunction. They're kind of being done in coordination with one another. So we're not wasting power being used there by like having it all called up at once. So there are going to be a lot of rules on that. Those rules are still being worked out. We are going to be dealing with the path for that towards the end of this presentation, and we'll get to that here in a minute. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, with the requirement for each RTO and ISO to make these rules, they also are going to have discretion on how those rules are designed, um, as long as they don't limit distributive energy resources unnecessarily. So, while FERC Order 2222 is requiring each RTO and each ISO to um, kind of accept this and to work with this, they are going to be given some ability to do it differently than other ISOs and RTOs. So it's very possible that in a state like Missouri, which part of the state is served by the Southwest Power Pool and the other part is served by MISO, that you could have different designs on those rules and regulations. And so again, one of the things that regulators and policymakers are struggling with in Missouri is trying to bring SPP and MISO kind of in more coordination and more harmony with delivering power. I think I just saw where Evergy was testifying in front of the Kansas legislature and was talking about kind of some of their new agreements that the Southwest Power Pool has with MISO and how that was able to help deliver power to the Southwest Power Pool during some of these extreme weather events that we've seen in the past month here in Missouri and Kansas. So you are seeing more coordination with transmission, and it is going to be a question of whether or not that is going to extend to what these distributive energy resource markets look like. So they're going to be doing that. Now, one of the big things that that this is going to deal with is double counting. Order 2222 addresses that. We don't want to do that. I mean, I think the best example of that is net metering and aggregation. Like, let's say you own a solar array on your house and you've got battery storage somehow connected to it. You could be selling that power to your utility that your solar array is making, or you could be selling it to an aggregator and it'd be going to the wholesale market. Now, I want it to be clear that you can do both of those things. That FERC Order 222 will allow you to do both of those things. You just can't get paid twice. What the rules are going to require is that, like, let's say that you are a net metering customer and that you are also working with a distributive energy resource aggregator, one of these ARCs, that you can sell to the utility directly. You can sell to this aggregator, but you cannot try to get credit for selling the same energy twice. You're not going to be able to do that. Now, I don't know what that rule is going to look like. I don't think Missouri has tried to tackle that yet about how net metering is going to interact with the distributive energy resource rules, but that's an example of that. Or the example we have here of the behind the meter distributive energy resources being paid for the megawatts it produces, which, by the way, megawatt hours is not going to be something that a typical home is going to be talking about. That's going to be, for a factory, or that's going to be for a large scale commercial or industrial user. And those same megawatt hours are used to reduce the customer's load profile. Let's say they've got a demand response program with the utility. Then that DER will be double counted as both a supply resource as a load reduction. We don't want to double count it. I don't think that the purpose of this is to discourage demand reduction. I don't think that demand response is trying to be discouraged here. I think what it's just basically trying to say is, if you're going to do demand response and you're going to sell to the one of these aggregators, you just can't make double your money. And I think that's fair. I think that's fair because, as again, it can increase system costs and it can result in cost shifting, and that's ultimately unfair to other customers. And while we want to see economic incentives for people to be able to use these programs, we don't want it to be done in an unfair way. Next slide, please. Okay. Um, we have these other requirements involving information, data, and uh, telemetry, telemetry. I don't know, telemetry. I should have practiced that before we started this. It's certainly telemetry. It certainly looks easier to say than it is. The DE aggregator, those aggregators who are going to be bundling this up are going to be responsible for the management, dispatchment, metering, and settling of individual distributed energy resources. You can see here what those each one of those things means. The metering is going to be providing settlement and performance data. That's going to hopefully prevent the double counting. And the telemetry segment is going to be dealing with visibility, and that's going to be necessary for reliability and safety awareness. So, you have to think a little bit about metering as being something that's going to be dealing with the financial aspect of it, where the telemetry is going to be dealing more with the engineering components of this. The standardized data collection, communication protocols, and telemetry are crucial for coordination. That's true. You want to make sure that these, the reliability and safety is also working with the data, is working with the collection of this information. Um, and aggregators will need to have smart meters and communication infrastructure to control that. Those distributed energy resources, those virtual power plants, or those DER aggregator companies such as AGL, Tesla, Sunrun, or Ohm Connection as some examples that we pulled out there. So, this is going to work. I mean, now that we've got smart meters out there, and now that we've seen a lot of investment into the advancement of our infrastructure, it's going to be easier to collect this data, to collect this information and make sure that it's being all coordinated in a way that protects consumers, that protects the system, and ultimately makes for accurate financial information. So I think all that's being factored in to what the FERC order is trying to accomplish. Next slide, please. And also the goal of enhancing flexibility and reliability. The distributed energy resources are going to address net load ramps, renewable energy curtailment, and system operational cost savings. So basically, we're trying to look at how um, these distributed energy resources, energy efficiency, net metering, battery storage. I mean, basically talking about how we're going to manage those in a way that they're being used and they're being put on the grid in a way that's going to be useful for other customers. I know there's a lot of criticism out there about certainly about net metering and about solar and about it being um, you know, only useful part of the time. I think that ultimately kind of gets addressed by the storage components. I think that ultimately that gets addressed by the fact that you are going to be looking at the fact that in the very near future, we're going to be able to make solar and then be able to keep that dispatchable at any given point. And I think that's going to be really important. And that's going to be important for replacing those fossil fuel generators um, that are considered more base load, that are considered to be, kind of available and dispatchable at all times. But ultimately, we are not going to be building coal plants anymore. I think that it's kind of a consensus that is not feasible and that is not going to be economically realistic. And so we are going to have to be looking at like where that's going to be coming from. And I think that the idea is that this distributed energy resources can be a way of dealing with that shift. So that's kind of what the flexibility and reliability, the flexibility issues are. And the reliability is that these DER is going to contribute under extreme weather conditions. And let's kind of talk about that in terms of, I mean, I don't necessarily think I think storage is something that's going to be able to be effective during extreme cold weather. But when you look at like really what saved the day in the extreme weather that the southwest part of this country faced back in the summer, the demand was high when the sun was out. And so solar was able to make up a lot of the slack there. And that was something that was going to ultimately be really that's going to ultimately be beneficial during extreme heat circumstances. So I think that's important there. Um, and I think also, like, the fact that if you have more and more resources during extreme weather, during other examples where there might be technical problems or cybersecurity issues, that these individual smaller bits of just generation are going to be able to help smooth over some of those challenges. And I think that's ultimately one of the things that FERC is trying to resolve as well. Next slide, please. And so I kind of mentioned something, about how the state ultimately has jurisdiction with a lot of these issues. One of the decisions that got made in October of 2023, pretty recently, the Missouri PSC overturned a decision that they had made in 2010 that prevented demand response aggregation among Missouri customers. Um, so basically, that got overturned. If you are a commercial or industrial customer, you can now work with an aggregator to bundle up your demand response programs and those benefits from that, and be able to sell that directly to MISO or SPP. That is a decision that the PSC had been looking at for several years. It is a decision that Renew Missouri had advocated for, that we had submitted written comments asking for them to overturn that 2010 decision. I know there has been some points of clarification that have been needed off that initial order that I think were approved just a couple of weeks ago. But I think ultimately this is going to be something that is going to really increase how many customers engage in demand response, and how many of them work directly with aggregators and selling that to the market. I just really hope that it is in a process that is going to be fair and equitable to all parties that are a part of that. And I think also, while it should not discourage anybody from involving themselves with the utility demand response programs, we also want to make sure that, again, we don't have that double counting issue. So that was kind of a recent decision. I'm not sure if there's anything else on the docket for the Public Service Commission that's going to be looking at this moving forward and opening this up, but that's something that just recently happened. So I think you're going to start seeing more of that as the FERC Order 2222 kind of rolls out. Next slide, please. Which brings us to next steps. Because this is going to vary again. SPP and MISO are two very different organizations. They're going to be doing things differently. The proposed implementation date for MISO is October 1st, 2029. So, I mean, we're still looking at almost 6 years away. But they are trying to direct MISO to set the implementation date sooner than that. And we believe that new date will be announced in April of this year. So in a couple months, we'll know when that is. So that's still, I mean, I don't know when that is going to be exactly, but I mean, it still gives you several years to be prepared for that. SPP is looking at next year, and they've already filed their compliance in April of 2022. So they're ahead. They're ahead on this. And so, but there is a lot. I mean, there's a lot of coordination here between all the utilities that are a part of all these ISOs and RTOs. There's a lot of coordination between regulators and the federal government, state regulators and federal regulators. And so, certainly this is not an easy process, but it is one that's been going on for some time already and will continue going on at least for the next several years. Next slide, please. And before the implementation, the ISOs and RTOs must file their plans. They must update and automate. They must update and automate existing market systems to accommodate the integration of distributed energy resources. They must ensure the technical infrastructure is in place To support that DER integration, we must develop communication protocols with the distribution utilities, which in the case of Missouri are like, the municipal utilities as well as the IOUs that control not only the generation and transmission, but the distribution of their energy to their customers. They got to obtain regulatory approval, which can also be a very slow step process. And it establishes the rules and procedures for how DERs can participate in the market. Again, that's part of what they're already doing right now, and that we're already seeing, as an example, that double counting factor. Next slide, please. So to recap, FERC Order 2222 unlocks the potential of distributed energy resources in wholesale markets, sets the stage for more flexibility, for more flexible, reliable, and competitive energy landscape, creates new opportunities for customers, earn more money, and it ultimately benefits the grid by improving reliability and affordability for customers while reducing stress on it. Next slide, please. And that's it. We want to thank Blitz Barget and Deutsch, LLC. They do litigation, employment, corporate, regulatory, and government solutions, real estate, tax, and estate planning, as well as alternate dispute resolutions. They are located in St. Louis, Columbia, and Jeff City for all of those legal needs. If you are interested in sponsoring any of our CLEs, please contact me at james@renewmo.org, and I'll get you set up. What's the last slide there, Tori? Yeah, questions. You can mail us. That's our headquarters there in downtown Columbia. That's our office line that usually goes right to my voicemail because it's usually someone calling me trying to sell me something. And that is our website, our Instagram, and our info@renewmo.org. We're also on X, formerly known as Twitter, as well as Facebook, and I believe we're also on TikTok, right, Tori?
Yes, we are.
For you hip kids out there. And I believe, oh, wait, I actually have a question. I'm sorry that, that just got put up there. Let's see. Someone else. Well, thanks, Tim. We are happy to have provided the CLE. And Keith Mathis, is it possible for us to get a copy of these slides? Tori, we have everyone's email addresses, don't we?
Yeah, we'll be sending out the recording and the deck.
Yeah, you'll get this. Don't worry. Okay, so Ty Gorman, our friend there at Sierra Club. Can you bring up the map that shows service area for MISO versus SPP? Yeah, let's do that. Can we go back to that?
Yes, I'll do that while you.
Yeah, so for Ty, to what extent are electric utilities that have no incentive to allow DERs into the market responsible? Well, I think, look, they are, to the extent that all the municipal utilities and investor-owned utilities are members of either SPP or MISO. So if you're a member of that, you're going to have to do this. Now, are you going to be fighting for rules and regulations at the state level if you're a utility that you believe are more favorable to you as a utility? I mean, I would hope they would do that. That's kind of part of their goal and their job. But ultimately, you're going to have to see this integrated into the municipal utilities and the investor-owned utilities. Now, the big not question mark, but I mean, the big challenge is there are a lot of customers of Missouri's rural electric cooperatives who are not going to be able to take advantage of this because they're technically not in an ISO or an RTO. That may change. I don't have any indication that the current leadership of Associated Electric has any interest in joining an ISO or an RTO, or that they would follow this. They have historically been they have a lot more antipathy towards distributed energy resources than other utilities in the state. Or at least currently that's the case. But I believe that their incentive is that they are participating in these markets in either a MISO or SPP, and so they're going to go along with that because I do believe that is their incentive. So that's the map. That's the map there. It's not precise because there's a lot of rural electric cooperative territory that's all over the state, but that's pretty close. I mean, SPP is like essentially the western side of the state, and MISO is, I mean, for the most part, the eastern side, but you do see that there are areas. I mean, Ameren has service territory like near Kansas City. It's not a lot, but there are areas of Clay County, like Kearney, that are served by Ameren, which I've always found to be really unusual. But good luck with the ACI. No comment on that one, but yeah, I think that they seem very they seem very set in their desire not to join one of these organizations. That's true. I can attest to that because I've asked them and I've seen their response. So that is it. Yes, we will be getting this to you again. If you need a certificate for your CLE, please let me know. But we're almost to 1 o'clock. We went over our time, Tori. So good for us. I hope you all enjoyed this, and I appreciate you supporting Renew Missouri and this program. And we'll see you soon. All right, bye now.